Awesome. Well, let's get started here. Thank you so much for coming out. The What's New 2026 event with SWYFT Solutions. We're so excited to have you guys here. Just so you're aware, we have a lot of stuff for you guys today. So obviously there's some things at the tables, but we'll have some other giveaways and things that we'll be talking about. So we're ready to have some fun. We also are going to be recording today, so we'll send this to you afterwards. So if you want to take some notes, go for it. Great. That's awesome. But also, we'll send you a complete recording so you guys can go through and watch it. Take your note share with the rest of the team, however you guys want to do it. My name is Stephen Waringa, along with Matt and Anna, who is running around somewhere. We founded SWYFT Solutions in 2020, so about 5 years ago now, and had the pleasure of supporting roughly 1,200 licenses and 700 customers throughout the U.S. And some of you guys are here today, which is awesome. The rest of them are going to get the great giveaways and the special things that we're going to be talking through today. So thank you so much for coming. Yes, a couple quick thank yous. I'll switch over here. Matt, can I go to Surge? So this is a beautiful space, startup accelerator here in Holland. So thank you so much to Surge and the Surge team. We'll give them a big round of applause later, considering they're not listening right now, but maybe we'll send them a recording of us clapping. Yes, we're very grateful for Surge, but also SolidWorks. It's all about SolidWorks today, right, guys? So we're excited to celebrate SolidWorks, about what's new. We're going to be talking through some cool features. But also, as you guys are aware, it's SolidWorks' 30th anniversary. So what I would like to do is have everyone stand up. And Valerie, I see you have your phone out. So Valerie is from the Dassault team. We've got right here Anna Crew, Dassault or SolidWorks. So thank you guys for coming up. Valerie, come up. I had not asked her to do this, but I'm going to do it right now. So what we're going to do, I would really love to show the rest of the Dassault and the SolidWorks crew that's not here today, West Michigan SolidWorks Pride here. So let's all stand up, and it's SolidWorks' 30th birthday. So what we're going to do is we're going to sing happy birthday to SolidWorks here. And I did not ask Valerie's permission to be up front, but this is what we're going to do. So we're going to sing happy birthday to SolidWorks, and then we'll get started with the day. So.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear SolidWorks. Happy birthday to you.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Let's get started.
I am Matt. I am super excited to also have all of you here today. I appreciate you all coming and spending the time to come out and learn a little bit about what you're going to be able to take advantage of in this next release of SolidWorks. So one thing I do want to kick things off, to be a little bit interactive throughout, we're going to play a little game if you'd like to participate. I'm going to switch over here. And if anybody has heard of Kahoot, we're going to have kind of a standing Kahoot throughout. I'm going to pull up this QR code. If you'd like to participate, winner at the end of this session, there will be a little prize basket that you will get. And what we'll be doing is taking a look back over the past 30 years of SolidWorks and doing some quiz to see who has the best knowledge of some of that history of some of those SolidWorks features being added throughout the years. So I'll give everybody a second here to get booted up. When you scan this QR code, you should be asked for your name, and then you should be in the game. Looks like we've got 16 members in. I'm going to go ahead and get started. This first question is just a poll. There's no points associated with this first question. And then I'll be kind of scattering these questions throughout. Beyond the first question, there's going to be 6 questions scattered throughout that will have points. And then your speed to the answer and the correct answer gets you the most points. So the faster you answer with the correct answer, you get the most points. This first one, no points associated with it. I just want to kick things off by understanding what everybody here is most excited to hear about today. So we have parts, assemblies, and drawings, data management, simulation, or maybe the happy hour. Awesome. Look at that. Parts, assemblies, and drawings. That's the heart of SolidWorks, getting into your 3D design. We heard it in that video. 2D design was doing well for those parts, but as soon as they got into those assemblies, it just could not handle at the speed that they needed to travel at when designing and manufacturing their products. So super excited to be diving into some of those new capabilities. We'll be touching actually on all of these topics today, some a little bit more in depth than others, especially those parts, assemblies, and drawings. So excited to see that that's a big focus of the attendees today as well. So we already got a look at the organization of Vermeer, but also zooming out a little bit with SolidWorks as well. In terms of SolidWorks, traditionally it has been at the general availability release, GA release of that next version year that a lot of these new functionalities are being added. One thing I did want to highlight here is that has transitioned over the recent past to be actually new functionalities and capabilities are being added in throughout the year. So you don't have to wait until that next version year to get some of those new functionalities. As those service packs and functional deliveries are being released, you're getting new functionality in SolidWorks. So as we take a look at the timeline here, 420 total functionalities throughout the year of 2025 have actually been added. This is not just SolidWorks Design throughout the entire SolidWorks portfolio of products, but 420 total functions throughout the year, and including the 2026 release that will be launched here in November. So throughout today, we'll be focusing on 2026, but we will take a look back at some of the things that were introduced throughout the year in 2025 that you may not have been familiar with or may not have even known were added. So as we go throughout today, we'll be focusing on one data set. This is the Vermeer horizontal driller. We have 22,000 pounds of equipment here, a lot of equipment to design in SolidWorks, 28,000 pounds of thrust. So this allows you to go ahead and think fiber optic cable, any kind of utilities that you need to traditionally dig a trench. You don't have to dig that trench. So this allows you to go underneath existing infrastructure. You can go under sidewalks, roads, bridges, without having to dig up and disrupt the day-to-day life of people using that infrastructure. So this has become the industry standard in horizontal drilling over the past 50 years. So super excited and grateful for the Vermeer team sharing this model with us to be able to highlight some of the new capabilities in SolidWorks 2026. And like I mentioned, we're digging in with a whole suite of topics today. I know we don't have a super long time, so we'll be spending a little bit more time on some of these than others, especially the parts, assemblies, and drawings with some of those highlights of all of your interest. But there's one capability that I wanted to highlight specifically before we jump in to the meat and potatoes here, and that is selective loading. So this is actually if you have SolidWorks with Cloud Services, 3D Experience SolidWorks, if your data is stored on the platform, this capability opens up, if you're dealing with large assemblies, the ability to selectively choose components across your larger assemblies and open them, even if it's in multiple different sub-assemblies. That allows you to reduce the amount of actual resolved geometry you need to open if you're doing things like routing systems or other modifications across different components and sub-assemblies. So I'm gonna do a quick little highlight here. This could be a whole session of its own, so just some quick videos to cover this. Then I'll be diving into a live demo for, parts, assemblies, and drawings. So in terms of this assembly, we have this assembly open in SolidWorks currently. This is also saved to the 3D Experience platform, so if you're using that for data management, it is already saved in this example. But we have this subset of components here that we might want to work alongside. Traditionally, you'd have to open up that full main assembly, and then you could hide or suppress other components just to get down to these specific components and sub-assemblies that cross between different layers of sub-assemblies. Now, jumping to the 3D Experience platform, we can go through and do a number of different filtering techniques to create what this filter set that we can then open in SolidWorks. In this case, we're using a selection filter where we just go in and click on those components to be added to this group. And now we can see that same preview, but instead of opening the main assembly and hiding all of these components, we have this filter as an object and actually can just drag that in, and it only is loading the components that were in that filter into your SolidWorks session. So rather than loading all multiple hundreds of components, you can choose specific components that are associated with this filter and just open those. Even if they're single parts, even if they're one part and one subassembly, and it will all be linked back. You can make modifications. The overall assembly file is still there, so modifications you're making are still being propagated to that overall assembly file. So dealing with large assemblies, I mean, this is a total game changer if you're dealing with large assemblies, because traditionally you'd have to go ahead, resolve all of that, which anybody that's dealt with large assemblies knows that can be, you've got all sorts of tricks in the book, but this just being able to pick and choose or selectively filter based on a set number of different properties, maturity states, or even just within this volume of space, I want to choose these components to be included in that filter. So a number of different ways that you can go through, and this is just like a part, treated just like a part. You can add that, attach it to a task, and assign that task to somebody. They then get that task assigned. They don't have to know, I have to exclude all of these other components. They just open that filter set, and it filters right down to those components in their SOLIDWORKS session. So here we've opened that component from the task, and this is a great example, routing. If you're routing something throughout an assembly, you need the beginning and the end point of that route. You might need also some things loaded that you know you need to avoid throughout that route, but you don't typically need the full assembly loaded just to route components throughout. So if you're dealing with a large assembly and it's slowing you down, you can just choose the specific components that you need to carry out that routing assembly, add that route, and then it'll be propagated to the main assembly. Not only can you create these filters, these are saved as objects. So if you need to go back and open that filter, it is an object that you can go back to, and it even has its own maturity state. So if you want to release it to stop people from making modifications to that filter set, you can. And you can also go through and carry out revision, the same revision workflow on these filter sets as well. If you want to make changes to these, each of these will be saved as objects are in the platform. Each revision is saved individually, so you can always go back as well and have that history. Not only can they be used in assemblies, also drawings. And they're not just kind of floating off in space, they're tied back to that product. So here we're seeing actually a kind of a where used diagram, a children parent component diagram for relations. You can see that this filter set shows up as a relation to this assembly. So then you know if you're ever doing a kind of tear down of what's related to this assembly, if I change this, what else is going to be affected, you'll also have that pulled into that relational explorer as well. So that was just one standalone component that I wanted to highlight a little bit separately here. If you're dealing with large assemblies, that was a really quick highlight. If you want to take advantage of this and want some walkthrough on how to best take advantage of this, I'd be happy to schedule some time and walk through that a little bit more slowly, step by step, on how that can be taken advantage of for your organization. So with that, we're going to be jumping into parts. With parts, I'm going to hand that over to Tom.
So thank you very much, Matt. For anybody who doesn't know me in this room, I see a lot of familiar faces. My name's Tom. I started at GRCC quite a while ago as a computer-aided drafting major. I was a tutor there, and then I transferred over to GVSU and continued tutoring, I hate to say it, pro-E over there, but then got back into SOLIDWORKS once I found my way into the professional workplace. And since I've been using it for about 10 years consulting, prior to joining SWYFT about, 15 months ago, something like that, and I've been amazed at what I've been able to learn since. There's so much more of the program that I thought I knew that I didn't. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and dive into the parts, because in SOLIDWORKS, most of what we do at least starts with parts. For some of us, parts also includes weldments. Weldments can lead to structures, and if you're fancy, then you can model entire assemblies as multi-body parts. So we want to build that strong foundation today, and we'll go ahead and dive into some of those new features that SOLIDWORKS has heard your voice on, and maybe some of those why didn't we have this already things that finally are coming to light. A very simple hat bracket, and I designed this in SOLIDWORKS 2023 because I want to illustrate a couple things that as we move forward into the new release of 2026 with some of the great features in that, you can go back and kind of remember some of the things that I'm going to cover very, very briefly. First of all, we have a base flange right here. This is a sheet metal hat bracket, nothing fancy, but let's say if this was created traditionally all the way up until SOLIDWORKS is released in November, SOLIDWORKS 26 is released in November, you can't offset this base flange. If that's ever a feature you've used in part modeling, offsetting right from your sketch plane can be super handy, especially if you know that distance that you want to go. Think automotive, think aeronautics, where all of the time you're supposed to model to the center of gravity. Well, in this case, we can't make that change. So just keep that in mind for a moment. And the other thing I want to do is I want to delete this terrible hole pattern for this cut extrude. Let's say if I were doing things right, I probably should use a hole wizard feature, but I'm just going to go ahead and try to delete it today. And this is 2023 right now, but it would be the same if I were using 2025. I'm going to go ahead and delete the absorbed features because I don't need that sketch. And SOLIDWORKS is going to tell me, hey, bud, you can't do that. You had equations tied to that, and now there's a bunch of equations messed up. Now, this is probably the biggest thing for me. I'm going to jump right to my favorite thing of SOLIDWORKS 2026 right off the bat. I don't want to have to come in and mess with these equations after I've deleted something. So I'm going to go ahead and try to delete them. I still have to go back and get that last one. I'll go ahead and hit OK. And now I can move forward with my life. I can take my design to the next phase, adding hole wizard, whatever, put it into an assembly without a big red equation manager yelling at me. So now, if we keep those two things in mind, real quick, I'm gonna jump to SOLIDWORKS 2026. And this is a bracket pulled right from the Vermeer model that they shared with us. And to my first point, offsetting that base flange is gonna be the first thing I'd like to show you. Now, this is something you can do in a regular extrude. If you haven't seen this trick before, it's a really great trick, especially if you use in-context modeling at the assembly level. And we're going to go ahead and show you right this from feature. We could, if you had another surface or face, we could offset from that. If we're in a model, or excuse me, in an assembly, maybe you grab a vertex, or if you know the distance, you can just type it right in. And if you see that is shifted, and that's maybe not the way I wanted it. So let's go ahead and move it out the other way. So you can see that that has come off of its sketch plane by my value of 2 inches. If you had a different value to put in, if you had a vertex to put in, it could update dynamically as well. So that's the first really big feature. Now I want to go my, again, terrible model. I apologize. I wanted to keep the model simple though, so I could really demonstrate this capability. This is, you see I've set up a whole bunch of equations here. And last time I had a hat bracket that had holes that I deleted, the cut extrude feature. I was greeted with a big red equation manager error. Now, when you go to delete absorbed features and it knows that there are equations associated, it can delete them right from here. If you pick that, it tells you exactly which equations it's going to delete. This is super handy if you know the model and those equations, and let's just say Matt set something up that has a whole bunch of equations and I don't want to mess with those, right? Then you just go ahead and delete these. It'll let us know that it's going to do so, and no more equation manager error. So I said hallelujah. If you want to say hallelujah, go right ahead, because this was a big one for me. I was super happy to see that. All right. Now, next, I'm going to keep it in sheet metal. I'm going to go back to that other model that I had. Now, we do have break corners got a little bit smarter. And I think this is kind of a big one, especially we have a lot of seating in industry in the area. You don't want sharp edges sticking out where people are going to interface with sheet metal products. See it all the time, and I can go in and I can pick my fillet and go in and find every single one of my corners. Have a hard time finding the corners sometimes because the sheet metal can be thin. It's great, it works, but there's a better way. And that is, if we go into sheet metal, get our corners, break corner. And this feature itself isn't new, but what is new is the ability to collect all corners. And it's just going to grab them all for me. So there's no more need to worry about, is this edge going to be rounded out? Am I going to have OSHA coming back at me because I cut a worker with one of my designs? It grabs them all. Yes, it's happened. It grabs them all for you. They get nice round corners, and you're good to go right off the bat. All right, that is my delete equations. Now I kind of want to move off to also from the Vermeer product. This is structure systems. If you haven't used structure systems, it's like an extension of weldments. If you haven't done anything with weldments, but you make weldments, come see me at the happy hour, because I'd love to walk you through it, because it's a great feature, I guess, in SOLIDWORKS that I think maybe gets a little underutilized. So I'm jump over to this model, hit my recents, open this up. And this one, I think is great for providing clarity, and it's going to make your workflow a little bit faster. So if you aren't familiar with weldments, basically you lay out a skeleton, tell it what tube you want, and it will build it for you. It'll miter corners for you. It will tell you what your junctures are going to look like. But in this case, we're talking about the corner management feature. This got a big update and looks much better and tells you a lot more right off the bat. And so just by right-clicking and editing the feature, you can already see that this is a little bit more clear as to what it's doing. Single, two-member, and complex intersections are super common out in industry. If you're putting together a weldment, you want to know what you need to weld, this is a great, I guess, preview. Great way to see how it's going to have to be cut. Great way to see where you may have room left for weld beads. And now, the difference here is by clicking on a corner, we get a great little preview here of what its capabilities are in terms of termination and extension, and you get a very clear preview of exactly the type of corner you're going to have. So I see over here, I don't particularly, there we go. Now we should have matching corners. Give it a click. Give it a click, and we have a good preview of exactly what that's going to look like without having to confirm, go out into the model, wait for it to rebuild, go back, make your changes again. It all does it in one shot. So I think that that is a really big part of this. Now, again, talking about to our Southwest Michigan fab group, and I know that there's a really deep talent pool here for customized metal fab. I don't know exactly where it came from, but I'm proud to be a part of it, and I'm proud to see people here using SolidWorks for this kind of customization, because it can really take a lot of the heavy lifting off of the end for you. And I'm referring specifically to cut lists, and I've had quite likely questions from some of you here in the room in regards to cut lists and what its capabilities really are. And the short version is it tells you what you need to know about the individual piece, because we're in a part, right? We aren't in an assembly, so all of those pieces are going to be a little bit different, but SolidWorks recognizes when they're the same and groups them together into an item on a cut list. So that part has been around for a long time. And again, if you aren't familiar with it, I encourage you to come up and talk to me afterwards, because it's something you can really leverage, especially when you're pushing things out to the floor where cuts happen and your part actually gets fabbed up. But the new feature, and this is something I'm really excited about, is the ability to go ahead and link these cut list properties right to your custom properties, which is probably something you're used to. And you see custom properties in bill of materials, you see custom properties feeding ERP systems. Now this cut list ERP goes right into that as well. So you'll notice there's a description here already. I'm just going to add in a new one real quick. I'm just going to call it cut style. Not very technical, but we're just going to call it a laser cut. And that lives in the cut list item. It stays with that item, so if that item changes, that goes with it as long as it's still the same item ID. And going to File and then Properties, which is likely where you have your custom properties. You might have everything set up in your Custom Properties tab here in the Task Manager. The behavior should be the same. And now, you see, we already have description here. And I can bring that property now in this dropdown right from the cut list property. So this is the new part, and this is what links together. So cut list item 1 is the one that I changed. And you see, we'll go with description. And see, total cut length is another property. And then my custom cut length, or custom property that I added in, so we'll go cut style, cut list properties, cut list item 1, and I put cut style in. And once it calculates, we have laser. So now those two are fully integrated with one another. No longer would you have to go in and change that in a bill of materials if you have this evaluated value driving one of those columns. If you're loading it into an ERP, that all works together. I have one more thing I would like to show you real quick. This is, and if you've again gotten tech support from me, perhaps you know I love my reference geometry, perhaps a little too much. I make a lot of planes. Speaking of going back to SOLIDWORKS 2025, something that you might or might not be aware of is the ability to very, very easily make a new reference plane. I'm going to hold Control and click on this corner. That just makes a new plane for me. It is as simple as that. It would have saved me hours and hours going back in time. But moving forward, it's going to save me some more time. I'm happy about that. But when it comes to reference geometry, where I don't have a real good way of doing things until now was creating points. Let's say you have an inspection point, like you wanted to inspect this frame at a certain point, but you didn't want it to be associated with any other geometry because you didn't want it to move, or if you're using a CMM or possibly using it as an assembly feature, but you don't want to punch a hole in your actual assembly, we can now insert these right into our points with our XYZ coordinate values. And this is what's new down here. We're define position with the numeric value, and you see the little pink datum is highlighting there. And so X, B, right, and we'll leave that in the middle. Why not? We'll say 36 inches up for Y and maybe 18 inches forward for Z. Let's make sure that the pilot or driver has a clear view from this point at all times. So we put that in, and it can be a reference point moving forward. Also handy if you use it in a motion analysis. It can, again, drive motion, drive mates, other things that might be, you might be tempted to make a sketch in order to use a point for that. Now you don't even have to do that anymore. You can just put the point right in based on your XYZ coordinates, and that hopefully will save you all some time. Some other places where this might be very handy is if you're doing complex surface inspections for, say, aeronautics, or if you have a scan of like something irregular, such as a backyard, you're building a deck or something like that, and you want to put in some reference points that you know what those numbers should be, regardless of what scan data says, you can throw them in. They'll be right there for you without any further reference geometry needing to be created first. So that is my wrap for what's new in SOLIDWORKS 2026 for the parts portion. I think there's some great things here. When you add them all together, it makes for an even better SOLIDWORKS experience. So let's take a moment to appreciate when you delete things and it takes away the equations for you. I think that was a great thing. SOLIDWORKS does hear our voices when we put in enhancement requests. So glad to see that is come off. And I think next we're going to pass it off to Matt. Matt is going to give us a little intro to assemblies and some of the great new features that have come along there as well.
So while I'm pulling this, everybody go ahead and load up their phones again. We're going to jump into our first questions of the game. We're going to run through 2 questions right now, and then we'll circle back throughout the day again. We're going to do a quiz question here. What year was the SOLIDWORKS toolbox first introduced? 1998, 2000, 2001, or 2003? 2001. So SOLIDWORKS Toolbox was introduced in 2001. Looks like we got 6 people on the board here with the right answer to kick things off. We're going to do one more question here before jumping into the assemblies demonstration. Another quiz here. Before starting SOLIDWORKS, the founder used funds from which adventure to get the business off the ground? A prior software startup exit, an inheritance, a university grant, or blackjack wins? It is indeed blackjack winnings. So yeah, there's actually, I believe what's it called, 21. The movie 21 is actually, if anybody's seen that movie, that's the founder of SOLIDWORKS that was based on. So that experience of taking the MIT team and teaching them the magic of blackjack led to the tool that we all are here to celebrate today. Awesome. So we'll be jumping back to this, but speaking of SOLIDWORKS, we're going to take a look at some of the new capabilities in assemblies. One of the capabilities specifically in this segment is my favorite technology being added to SOLIDWORKS for 2026. So I'm super excited to see this capability. I'm certain that this will play out for some of you as well. Now, in terms of the first functionality that I want to look at is, I'm just going to open this part up separately. And I'm just going to open this up side by side for you. So traditionally, if you're working in an assembly and you make a change to a part that assembly references, you've now changed the assembly inherently as well. So if you make a change to a part, you also have to save that assembly. If you have one part file, it's really quick to save. If you have a really big assembly, it might not be that quick to save. Therefore, changing a part file in a really big assembly, if the only change you made was one part, but you still have to save the really large assembly, can lose you a lot of time if you're doing that frequently. So depending on the type of change, there's improvement in 2026 to where if it's only something that's graphically affecting the assembly and it's not actually modifying the assembly truly in terms of geometry, then you don't have to save the assembly if you don't want to. There's a separate save flag. So I'm going to highlight that capability here. I've got these side by side here. Currently, what I'll do is I'll go ahead and zoom in here. Up in the title bar, if you ever save, next to the file name, you'll see an asterisk. So I'll highlight this here in a moment. But there's no asterisk here. There's no asterisk on the part, which means I have the latest, up-to-date, what you see, changes saved to my machine. Now, there's a number of different things that qualify for a graphical change. The first example, I'm actually just going to take one of those capabilities that Tom mentioned and double-click on that plane that he grabbed and made a copy of. Just again, that's super cool capability. If you have reference geometry, you want to just do an offset off of a plane. You find that initial plane you want to start with, hold Control and just grab one of the points, click and drag, and you can drop it where you want, adjust specifically to the exact dimensions, and select OK. And now if we come in here, we can see that that is an asterisk here because this part has changed. If I want to have this plane, the next time I open it, I do have to save this part. But if I jump over here, demo magic here. So what's not showing up is an asterisk. There is also another symbol that will show up here that looks like and let's try this. Go ahead and reopen that. But the fact that it didn't ask me to save, that functionality is still working there in the background. I have had some instances where that symbol doesn't show up yet, so I haven't quite narrowed down the workflow that I've done to trigger that. But here it is. So now it's showing. That symbol where the asterisk is in the brackets, that means that I don't actually have to save changes to the assembly file. There is something referenced in that assembly that graphically was changed. I'll have to save that, but I don't have to save the assembly file itself. So if I'm in the assembly and I go hit Control S, you'll see that the assembly is actually automatically unchecked. It's going to assume that I don't want to save that assembly file unless I specifically choose, yes, I want to take the time and make sure all changes are pushed through the assembly. But in terms of this plane, I haven't actually modified the geometry of that part. Therefore, the manufacturing of the assembly wouldn't actually be modified. So I don't have to save that assembly. So if you're working with large assemblies, and just to highlight, this is an option. So this is a system option. If you want it to behave like this, you can turn it on. If you want it to, any change, make you save, that is still an option of functionality. So we'll go ahead and save selected here. Now kicking off to our next enhancement, I'm going to jump into our display state table. Now, in terms of a display state table, let's actually quick raise of hands. How many people use display states? Okay, we got a couple users of display states. How many people are suppressing a lot of components in an assembly for different configurations of their assembly? Anybody doing that workflow? Okay. Yeah, same hand. So it's telling me that there's probably some understanding of the line where to cross over. But display states allow you to save this part is hidden in this assembly, hide it, hide all of these same parts. It's kind of like that filtered view, but just for hide, show, transparency, colors, graphical properties. And in terms of performance, if anybody's getting into workflows where they find themselves suppressing a lot of components in an assembly just to jump between configurations and hide certain things in one configuration versus another, really take the time to look into display states because it's going to be a lot more computationally beneficial. It's faster. It doesn't take as much actual computing power to go through and calculate. I'm unsuppressing this. I have to recalculate all of the mates. With a display state, it's just hiding, showing. It's all graphical, so it doesn't have to do that calculation. Now, a display state table allows you to go through, and in this case, the assembly, you're seeing one enhancement right here, just the fact that I'm resizing columns. Being able to adjust this and configure the column layout and view was something not previously available. So something really small like that, traditionally very frustrating, like now it's cutting over and it's going to a new line, why can't I just drag this out? So small things like this are being added in just to increase that user experience. I mean, that's what SOLIDWORKS grew on, is just the ability to jump in, have a good user experience. So making sure that these things are added in, making sure that those capabilities, you don't want it to be frustrating or else you don't use it. So now we can adjust that, make sure it's a nice, tidy view. Just for reference, this is kind of a side point. A display state table allows you to, on a part-by-part basis within an assembly, for the current display state, choose which display state of the components you would like to use in the assembly level as well. So you can get into some real matrix level conceptual things of this is used here, this is used here. But another thing here is we can also come in here and just turn on or off the reference display state. So here, I'll stretch this column out. You can see these, if there are different display states available. Oh, and you can also do hidden or shown. But if there are different display states available, you can select these here. Or if you're not worried about it, you can hide or show as you need. Or you can hide or show all. So if you're jumping back and forth, you're mostly worried about hiding or showing things throughout the different display states, you can have that turned off. But then when you're ready to come in on a part-by-part basis, go in and choose, I want this part to have this display state and this display state of this assembly. You can show that view really quickly in the table. So just increasing that user experience when it comes to the display state tables. Now we've also had some improvements, speaking of tables. The configuration table here. I know we have one power configuration user in the house. Anybody else use a lot of configurations? Yeah. So configuration tables are super powerful to be able to see kind of a visual overview of everything that you're going to be configuring between the different assemblies or between the different components in an assembly configuration set. But if you have 500 components in an assembly, you don't want all of them necessarily to show. You might only want to see the ones that you're actually configuring something between the different configurations. So with this, if I want to configure something, all I have to do is just double click and it adds that in to the view. And then I can go ahead and choose whether that's going to be suppressed in this configuration. This is actually kind of in that rolled into one, showing another enhancement there. Traditionally, there's 3 different columns per item. And that gets really messy really quickly. It bulks up and kind of clogs up your view. With this, it defaults to just suppress or unsuppress. Now you do still have the option, of course. I can still go in and say, I want to see what configuration, I want to see if it's fixed or not. You can add those in, but traditionally, all of those would just come in. For every single item, you would go to add that, and it would just be cluttered. You can, of course, still go through, right-click and delete and remove those columns if you don't need them. But that just gives you that clean experience as you're going through configuration tables. If you're getting into large assemblies, it's messy enough as it is. So this allows you to make sure that you're only seeing what you really need to worry about as you're going through and modifying those configuration tables. All right, drum roll. This is one of my favorite capabilities of the 2026 release. How many people use toolbox fasteners? Any toolbox users? Okay, we've got a couple. What about McMaster? Oh, there we go. So we've got a lot of McMaster users in the house to download their fasteners. It's really a super powerful platform to be able to provide you with all these manufacturable components that you can actually just buy, whether that's in your end product, even just for a prototype, to be able to have someplace where you can quickly source these components, validate your equipment. But adding them into your assembly is a tedious process. You have to go through, insert, depending on how you made. I'm a big control select advocate, so control select one face and another, and then see the breadcrumbs up, or the in context toolbar come up, click on that mate, and then repeat for the second mate. And then if you want to lock the concentric mates, then you can do that as well. Now, this is actually not directly related to this functionality, but I'm on a roll of asking people questions now. How many people suppress the threads in their McMaster fasteners? Even better, one step ahead. If anybody's using McMaster fasteners with the threads unsuppressed, I would highly advise, if you're dealing with performance issues, to try suppressing them. Unless you're manufacturing that component, you don't want that level of detail in your model, because 1, you can't even see it. It's inside the geometry at that point. And 2, the graphics triangles still have to calculate and show and calculate the actual geometry itself. So that will really crank up your graphics triangle count, especially since it's really fine geometry. So you have 1,000 screws throughout your assembly and there's threads on all of them, your performance is going to tank. So be sure to take, you can even, if you want to leave them there, you can create a configuration where that is suppressed, have a simplified configuration if you want. So jumping into the capability here, I want to insert a component here, and I have a screw that I want to add. Now, the zoom doesn't work with this one, I forgot. You'll have to zoom in with your eyes here. If you look at the cursor, you'll notice that that little SOLIDWORKS symbol, if you can see it, has little blue sparkles next to it. So that's telling me there's this new capability where that fastener is looking for a hole to fit into. You don't have to go through and manually select anything. It will look for similarly sized holes, which I haven't gotten this 100%, so I may have to remove and redo this. This is still the initial release here. But this is pretty sweet functionality. There it goes. It just snapped it right into that hole. I click, and it's not just placing it, it is making mates. So if I click here, you've got a concentric mate it just added, and you've got a coincident mate. So I did do a little bit of testing with this just for anybody. I'll see if I answer some initial questions right off the bat. It does not have to be an exact hole size. I don't know specifically the range in which it will go, but it will eventually fall off. Like if this hole is too big, it won't recommend it. But it does not have to be a specific like drill bit size. It will not take depth into consideration, at least as of now. So you still have to be on the lookout for interference detection. With a McMaster, you're choosing a specific length right off the bat, and you want to make sure that the hole is deep enough to account for that. So you can have some overlap of geometry. So that's something to look out for. If you have a slot, it will have to be concentric with one of the arcs. It can work in a slot, but it has to be concentric in one of the arcs. It will not auto-center on a slot, at least for my testing. I could be missing something, but as I was diving into testing this for everybody to get some of those questions answered, it does work, but it has to be offset to one of the edges of the slot. Another thing that I want to show that might answer some questions, it is not just bolts. Oh, another thing. I have threads in this model. Let's see. Currently. It does not have to be a plain cylinder. If you have threads, which I don't recommend doing, it still recognizes the size of the bolt and will snap it into that hole, so whether it has threads or not.
Is that what I question? It doesn't matter if it's not a tool op or
No. This is from McMaster.
No other definitions added, like
No mate references, nothing. It was straight off of McMaster.
only master or any part.
Any, like you can model your own. Like it's intelligence looking for the shape of a screw, and as I'm about to show, also washers and nuts. So taking a look up here, let's say that I want to throw on this same washer and nut here. If you're doing linear patterns or feature-based patterns, that's always something to look into. But just to highlight this capability here, I can just hold control, similar to how we did with that, that plane. And if I click and drag, you'll see that cursor come in. This is another one where I think this session specifically, I've had to do things twice for it to snap correctly. There it goes. And I'll come down here closer to the bottom, and snap it into place. And sometimes different views work a little bit better. It'll take a little bit of playing around with it, but snap that right into place. So now, I mean, this is just the first release of this technology, so obviously there will be people finding workflows where there might not work in this scenario, but just think of where this is going to be in 3 months, 6 months, a year. The amount of time that I've spent, control select 1, control select 2, flip alignment, all of that. Another thing, it does not automatically lock the concentric mate. So if you want to do that, you can go back and lock the concentric. If you're worried about a fully defined assembly, no mates undefined, you can go back and lock the concentric mate, but it does not do that automatically. But otherwise, it's fixed, other than the spinning. All right. So that is some of the capabilities that I wanted to highlight here with assemblies in 2026. Super excited to see that capability coming in. There is one capability I did want to look back on in the 2025 timeline that was added in that's worth understanding that is available. So jumping in, disable auto resolve. Does anybody use lightweight here a lot? Okay. not too many, but if anybody's using lightweight or if anybody's not aware, you can go through and make sure that not everything's resolving. So when I mean resolve, it's loading all of the features of a part within an assembly. If you have the assembly in lightweight mode, it has like the reference, the top right front planes and the actual structure of the assembly, but it's not loading all of those features until you resolve it. So that resolve takes time. So with disable auto resolve, it's an option where you can go through and modify that behavior. Here we see as we're dropping that down, that little feather symbol is disappearing from the assembly feature manager, the assembly tree. But if we come in here and go into the feature manager options, there's auto resolve lightweight components. I can turn that off. So if I'm only worried about kind of navigating through the structure of the assembly and then I want to choose if I'm resolving something, this gives you that flexibility to navigate throughout the assembly itself. But then, nope, I'm going to make modifications to this component. I'm actually going to go through and take the time to let this resolve. So that allows for people that are typically larger assemblies that want that lightweight component, they can navigate throughout the assembly without taking the time every drop down to let it load a little bit, find exactly what you're looking for, and then resolve it from there. So with that, I'm going to hand things back off to Tom to take a look at what's new in drawings.
Now, and as Matt said, I want to touch on some of the third highest topic, drawings. Great enhancements coming to 2026 as well. This one was teased at World in 2025, and I was super excited because I would dare to say every one of you is going to raise your hand when I ask this one, who would like your drawings to at least be started for you? Okay, absolutely. Now this is something that SOLIDWORKS 2026 is introducing for us. It doesn't necessarily say, hey, we are going to create an entire set of working drawings for you, but we're going to set the table. I think this is a really cool feature. It does require, if you have 3D Experience SOLIDWORKS connected, or if you have standalone SOLIDWORKS with the serial number installation, you do have to have your connector installed. But once you get everything set, then it kind of takes something for you, and it will give you a great starting point. It still takes your human interaction. You still need to look at it, but it does leverage some cloud intelligence to take what you have, determine what's going to be a good view, and bring in some of the dimensions. And some of those can be driven by your initial sketch. So when you're setting up your sketch, you have things that are marked for dimension or not. It's a good idea to follow good dimensioning practices anyway, but now it becomes even more important as they take those same sketch dimensions and bring them into your drawing for you. So I'll continue with a little bit more live demo after this, but I wanted to have the official drawing or the official file going for this functionality. If you're not familiar with the right side of the screen, that is the 3D Experience task pane. And you'll see that we've selected these parts. It's loading them. That is real time in the video. Obviously, I'm not creating this myself, but it brings up your drawings very, very quickly, pulling dimensions right from the sketches that you made to make your part, and it's finding, and see, it wasn't perfect on that last one, but it gives you a place to get started. Now, you do have to have your templates all set up, and you do have to have is it the CAD family table, design library. Certain things need to be set up ahead of time, so you can't just download SOLIDWORKS 2026 and have it create a whole set of working drawings for you. But if you go through the steps to get everything set up, and with your drawing templates, with your formats, with your layout, it can do a really good job and take a lot of time right off that front end. And if you've ever sat up at 3 a.m. trying to get through one more drawing so that production can run in the morning, this takes away a whole bunch of that time, gets you to bed faster. So I think it's a really great way to introduce this leverage of maybe a little bit more automation, but you still get control. So I think that was certainly something I wanted to highlight. Very excited about that particular feature. And I'm sure we'll see more of that in the future as well. I'll go back to my live drawing here real quick. I just have a couple more that I'm going to wrap up with the live demo. These are really cool features, especially after you have that drawing created for you, or if you're pulling up somebody else's drawing and it's a mess. One thing that's been around for a long time, is, if you see the line behind, the magnetic line, this is great for just keeping your balloons clean, for making sure everything looks pretty straight, looks good for presentation. But if we look down below, you see that the annotations are not looking so hot. If I saw this come across my desk, I would be sending it back to the designer or engineer and say, hey, can you please clean that up for me? We can drag it around, we can make it look better. But now in SOLIDWORKS 2026, we do have the ability to add magnetic lines to annotations as well. And it grabs them just like it did balloons. You can kind of line it up how you like. And then you can go back and edit it afterwards. I don't need to do a lot of work to switch these two that are crisscrossed. I just kind of pull and it straightens it out for you. Kind of setting spacing in a way that it doesn't cross lines. Helps you see exactly what you need to see. And you should be where you need to be significantly faster to have a nice, clean looking drawing. And another thing I wanted to cover in terms of nice, clean drawings is break lines. And this is something that's kind of sort of been on the ASME and ISO discussion boards for a while. Now they've released some new standards. We need to have our break lines. So let's go ahead and dig into that real quick in SOLIDWORKS 2026. I'm just going to right click on my dimension and add dimension break. There it is. And go ahead and zoom in on this. You can see that it just makes that nice little break for us. It's 32nd of an inch. It scales appropriately. You don't have to worry about those crossed lines anymore. If I move this around, little Control Q rebuild, it becomes a straight leader again. You don't have to go and drag the grip back to the hot point or back to the edge that is originally created from. It knows that you've made a change. I'll do that one more time. Control Q, and puts the brake right back in for me. So another couple that I want to mention real quick, customizable GD&T frames. We're already seeing some of this on the screen for us already. If you use GD&T, you should know exactly what I'm going to be talking about. This can be a little tedious if you need to step outside of the boundaries, which, let's face it, we all have to sometimes in order to get our point across, perhaps in a way that our manufacturing facilities can work with, or perhaps our industry standards require. So now right-clicking and editing, or double-click, sorry. Give just a moment. I'm not seeing my interface. However, just again, the pre-release, sometimes it can be a little funny. But my point I'd like to get across, and I can talk through it in this case, when you're adding datums or if you're adding controls that would normally be like profile and whatnot, you can customize them now. It doesn't have to be this datum, this distance, and datum, primary, secondary, tertiary. You can put in your own values, letting you communicate with your factory floor in the best possible way for your situation. So that is, those are the things that I'm most excited about in the drawings portion. I think that overall this year, I think the feel has been, these are things that are going to take some work off your plate. These are items that we really think are important for our customers and have heard their voices, enhancement requests, and seen on bug and crash reports that we are going to make better. And it's a lot of little things that maybe don't look exciting on paper, except for Matt's, of course. That assembly shot is just, I think that's great. And I've tried to kind of wrap it all up into one thing, and it's just that SOLIDWORKS seems to care. And I think that's going to be great for us moving forward as a community. So that brings us to, I think we're going to take a quick little break. We're going to take some questions here. If anybody has any questions, if you need a moment to grab a drink or use the restrooms, now is a great time. But if you have questions, go ahead and raise your hands. All right, I'll try to keep things moving along pretty quick. I'm going to move over to the Dassault videos that were so kindly provided for us in this next series. We're going to talk about the handoff from, or different handoff from design to manufacturing. That's model-based design, or MBD. In SolidWorks, we certainly leverage something called the Dimension Expert tool, and that can put dimensions right in your 3D model, so you don't have to have a print anymore. And there's a lot more to the conversation than that, but the possibility does exist, and SolidWorks sees a lot more companies moving to this kind of a model, so you don't have to have prints anymore if you don't want to. So let's go ahead and hop into that video real quick. We're going to show, and now in SolidWorks 2026, they're going to let us hide and show some of these annotations. And this actually is really big because if you're out on the factory floor trying to interpret some of these dimensions, how do I actually put these together? There's dimensions in my way. I would like to get these out of the way, and somebody deletes those dimensions, and then there's a whole other issue. Now we can just simply turn them on and off. So SolidWorks has heard the voice of the people on that one. And now you can filter these. So you can go in and you can hit your model-based design feature up. It's in the top right, and it's towards the appearance section, which you've probably used before. And you can type in to the search bar right on the top the type of dimension you're looking for. So if you're looking for a fillet dimension, it will actually give you fillets highlighted on the screen, so you can look and make sure, going back to my previous comment about making sure there's no sharp edges to hurt anybody out in the field, it will tell you, you can look at just the fillets and make sure that they're big enough that it meets whatever standards you have to meet. You can clear that out, and then you can go to your positional tolerance, and you can look at just your positional tolerance right in the model-based design, as opposed to having to go through and try to figure out which ones are positional or not. So it really clears the board for everybody right in the 3D model and lets you look at only what you need to see, whatever your role may be. So if you are like in engineering, if you're out on the floor, if you're in inspection, you can look for what you need. It gives you that and only that. And it really clears things up a lot more for those who are using it. And these are, again, in the Dimension Expert portion of the program. So now, Matt, I'm going to hand it back over to you for a little bit of routing.
Who here, does anybody use routing today? Okay. And just for reference, the routing capabilities can be electrical. So if you're doing any kind of cable routing, wire harness, that you want to physically model and validate that how it will route through your assembly, and that it can make sure that the bend radius will meet all the criteria of your model. There's also tubing, so hydraulic hoses, anything like that. Piping, so if you're doing actually piped system, oil, gas would be a good one to think of there. But the routing can be done without the routing add-on, and that is part of the premium package with a manual extrude. But what routing does is it allows you to really streamline the ability to create these routed systems rather than having to sketch profile, sketch path, extrude, add additional features. It's more you're just drawing the line that route paths follows, and then you choose a certain pipe profile or tube profile, and it will add elbows for you. It'll add flanges. You can drag and drop. So it's just more of streamlining. If you're doing a larger system, it's very much worth looking into. That was just a little bit of background before I dive into some of the new capabilities that were added into routing. Now, with routing, when you add these tubes, pipes, wires into an assembly, that is actual geometry that's being developed, and it is added to your bill of materials. So you have that physical geometry being added, and then you can get the actual lengths added to your bill of materials. Now, another thing where if you're doing anything that needs, say, insulation or protection, you might want to add coverings to those tubes, electrical wires, etc. So we have a routed system here, and let me just make sure. I think I restarted. Yep, I've got it running. So the SOLIDWORKS routing add-in does have to be on at this time for this functionality. I can just right-click on this tube here and select Edit Route. And you can see here a little bit how this route was created. It's truly just the 3D spline that was from one point on the assembly to another, and it added that tube in here. But the capability that I want to highlight is a couple of new functionalities that come into coverings available for routing. So if I right-click on this line here, I can also just go to the routing tabs, but I have this Add Edit Covering, and I can go into covering here. Now, nothing new in that functionality. You could always add it, well, not always, but you could add a covering prior to 2026, but you were limited in the complexity of covering, I'll say, that you could add. So with this, I have this create custom covering. If I have covering library, I can choose from some defaults that are built into the system, but I'm more interested in taking a look at this custom covering. If I choose this custom covering, I can go in here and select material, and it will actually pull up my material library in SOLIDWORKS. So now, let's say I want this covering to be silicone covering here. I'll select apply and close. You'll see it pulls in here. I also can choose the thickness of that covering, and then I can select apply. And you can see here that it has added this layer on top of this segment of this route to take that covering into effect. So with this, I can also do multiple segments. So I can choose different segments as well and have this all add that in one. Now this is where we start to branch off with some of the new capabilities that were added in 2026, right? You'd meet a limit here, but what if I wanted another covering on top of that covering? What if I wanted a layering of some sort? I wanted insulation and then I wanted protection around that insulation, for example. But prior to 2026, it would be limited to one, whereas here, I can carry out that same workflow. Let's say I go in here and choose a carbon cloth here, apply, close. Say I'll go ahead and make this a little bit thinner here and select apply. And you now see that it's stacked these here layers on top of each other. So I can switch the order of these covering layers, and I can also, another new enhancement, save this configuration that I've set up for these different covering layers. So if this is something that I'm commonly using in different assemblies, I don't want to have to go in, find the material, 1, set a thickness, apply, find the material 2, set the thickness, apply. I want to be able to just have that as a preset selection of coverings. And with that up here, I can select this plus button up here with my favorite. I'll call this Vermeer. Oops. And select OK. And you see it here in the drop down. Now, I already have these applied. I'll circle back and show you how that's actually used. But when I go ahead and add that covering here, it'll go through and calculate that geometry. If I go ahead and back out and let that load, you'll see that it adds that covering on here. Now, I have noticed a couple of graphical things. You may notice some transparency and things that were functioning a little bit unexpected. As Tom actually mentioned this kind of offhandedly, we're both running a pre-release of the 2026, so there are certain things that you're seeing here, unexpected behavior that will be fixed already by the actual initial release in November of 2026. Now, I've gone ahead and added these coverings, but what about, let me go ahead and jump back here. Actually, go back to the assembly. We have a number of other tubes back here. Let's say that I came back another day. I want to add that set of coverings to these tubes as well. I can carry out that same workflow. Right-click, edit route. Right-click on the route, add edit covering. And that favorite is right there. I can select apply. I can select the different segments. Whoops. So you see here that there's that transparency, but that covering is there. So there's some graphical things that I've noticed where it's adding transparency, but it's actually adding the covering. And this, like I said, with the same thing with the tubes, that covering is also added to your bill of materials, your weight properties, and also shows you any interference to make sure that the covering would actually fit. If you've got something where it's tight, you don't actually have a lot of clearance, you want to know that when you add the covering, it's not going to blow up your whole design and cause any issues. So that is the first enhancement with routing that I wanted to take a look at. As we jump into our next enhancement, we've got these lights here. And then currently there's no wires associated with these lights, they're just floating, but we may want to go ahead and validate the actual route that the wire will take through this assembly. We can use routing for that as well. Now, down at the bottom of the assembly, there is a switch here where the wires will come from, and it will branch out, split in it will go down 2 paths and connect to each light. And you can see a preview of that here with that green line. But with the routing capability, I'll go ahead and jump in here, and I'll use this auto route. Or actually, I need to edit the route first. I want to jump in. I have this route started. And all I've done here, so routes, they can have a from to list where you're choosing specific pins of one component and a pin on another component. And you can set up the logic to actually map those together so that it knows what to look for in the assembly when you add those components to your assembly. I have gone through and preset that up. That's functionality that's been around. I didn't want to take a lot of time today on a tutorial on that. But that is, for this functionality, required. You would set up your from to, make sure that you understand this from pin 1 on this component to pin 1 on this component, and it's going to be this type of wire that's going to go between those 2 pins. And you set up that definition in the table. But if I jump in here with my auto route and check guidelines here, this guidelines has been available. This is not new functionality right out of the gate, but you see here, it tries to find, it's a little bit, actually, let's go ahead and, it's a little bit hard to see with all the geometry, but it tries to find the most efficient route for those wires to follow. But ultimately, that's not really realistically how I want those routed. I want to follow the geometry there. And the difficult thing, traditionally, I don't want to have to sketch the whole thing and not have it linked to my geometry. So the nice thing of having it sketched referenced to your geometry means that if you ever update that assembly, the sketch updates, therefore your routing updates as well. Make it very parametric, very dynamic. That's one of the main powers of that parametric modeling, is to be able to make changes and have those implemented very quickly. So as we jump in here, I have this new option. This is what's new here, is follow routing path. And if I go ahead and select that path, boom, those wires just snap right to that sketch that I had drawn, and that 3D sketch I had drawn and referenced to the geometry in my assembly. Therefore, again, whenever I go and make an update to the assembly, it also goes through and makes an update to my route as well. So you'll notice that there are 2 wires here. That's because in the from to table, there's 2 wires defined. So that, again, would be based on your from to table definition. But I have this option, convert guidelines to routes. So with this, I can select each individually, or I can just kind of window select those. And you just see those wires generate right then and there from choosing the routes that I wanted to generate the wires. And again, it's pulling the definition of what type of wire, again, from the from to table. So key piece of this functionality here. But once you have that set up, you can go and add routes very quickly and efficiently. And I'll go ahead and confirm this. And you can see that it has those wires following along that geometry or that sketch and right to that component. So again, if I was to update the geometry in a way that that sketch updated, since it's linked to that sketch, then you're able to update the route as well. So really powerful capability if you're doing any kind of, especially wire routed systems, to make sure that 1, you'll have the right lengths accounted for ahead of time, and 2, that you're going to be able to route it correctly as your geometry is built mechanically. Now, one last enhancement that I want to jump into with routing, and then I'm going to hand things back over to Tom. So I've opened up a flattened drawing here. So this is one of the wired harnesses of the system, and I've opened up a flattened drawing. Now we have all of our tables here and everything's arranged. Now, if you go ahead and make a drawing like this, as complexity grows, you may very quickly find that things start to get a little crowded on whatever sheet size you may have thought you needed to start things with. So you may want to go and change that sheet size to give yourself a little bit more room to work with in the future. Now, if I go ahead and right-click and select Properties, I can choose, and just to actually also highlight, I'm currently in size D here. I'll go ahead and right-click and select Properties, and let's go ahead and bump it up to a size E. So now it'll be a little bit more obvious once I bump it back, and I will still have to arrange the tables a little bit, but what it does is it doesn't do anything like that automatically for me. It keeps the way I've organized it, the way I've set it up, the way I've scaled the columns and got that table set up in one view is going to carry over from one view to another without you having to go through and resize all of your columns each and every time. So now that I've gone ahead and resized this, let me make it even more obvious. So you see that stretched column stayed stretched out. So you can resize things as you need, set it once, and then you change that scale of the sheet. It's not going to throw off the size of everything. You may still have to kind of drag things around, clean up their location. But overall, once you have things set up how you like them in one view and you just need a little bit more space, you just bump up that sheet size and rearrange where the tables are located to make sure you can read all of them. And then you're good to go with that new size. So those are some of the new capabilities that have been introduced in SOLIDWORKS 2026 for routing. With that, I'm going to hand things back over to Tom to take a look at some new functionality within Visualize.
Okay, well, SOLIDWORKS rendering, I won't spend a whole lot of time on it, but Visualize is, I guess, the younger, more capable brother of PhotoView 360, which was the rendering package that was kind of built right into SOLIDWORKS. And Visualize is certainly, we'll say, a more robust model rendering platform. So right here, we're going to see that one of the new things in 2026 is we have what we're calling DSPBR. And this isn't a Dissot-sponsored blue ribbon beverage. I had to look it up. Bidirectional reflectance distribution. And so it's a new format for the appearances that you can add that certainly plays a little bit nicer, is a little bit more on par with like Blender and some of the other Rhino, some of the other rendering programs you may find out there. Now the other thing, I'm pause this for just a moment. If you did ever use PhotoView 360, one of the biggest things I've heard from the rendering of SOLIDWORKS community is, why can't I render straight to Visualize from SOLIDWORKS like I could in PhotoView 360? Now it's baked in. SOLIDWORKS 2026 introduced Visualize, so it comes right from SOLIDWORKS. You do have to have everything loaded properly. You do have to have a Visualize license still, which comes with SOLIDWORKS Professional or higher, but it can be done right in SOLIDWORKS. I'll just continue the video. You see the SOLIDWORKS add-ins, Visualize right there, pulls that rendering up. And here you don't get the full suite of settings that Visualize offers, but you do still get some good renderings, and you can at least create a pretty decent image right in your SOLIDWORKS interface. And then moving on, so we have materials, we have SOLIDWORKS right in your interface, and another big win, I think, this one I think is hard to describe what this actually can do in your SOLIDWORKS work or in your Visualize workflow. But what you're seeing is a real-time recording of a rendering in Stellar Fast Mode. And Stellar Fast Mode, this is actually a rendering that you're working with live instead of either A, having to rotate the screen and wait for it to resolve, then rotate and wait for it to resolve. Stellar Render Mode, you can render almost full resolution in almost real time. It's very impressive. Obviously, this depends on your GPU. If you have a GPU that has AI capabilities baked in, this is even faster. So some of the new like NVIDIA ADA cards, we have that AI baked right into them. They work, well, they nailed it on this one. It's a stellar partnership between the GPU and Visualize, letting you set up your scenes a lot faster, and also, of course, your renderings then go faster as well. And next up, anybody in here ever work with imported geometry? Yeah, I thought I hear some grumbles too. So we're definitely getting a bump in productivity. I'm sorry, that means you might have a reduced number of trips to the coffee shop or to get another donut, because you can do those in the background. Let's see, let's get this one up and rolling. In SOLIDWORKS, you can go to this little tab here at the bottom of your feature tree, and it will allow you to load imported files in the background while you continue to work. I'm going to let that do its thing. Now, of course, in this video, it's very, very quick, but if you had a large and complicated assembly that you wanted to import, something with a lot of surfaces, a lot of points, you want to do something else during that time. I know you want to go to the coffee shop, you might want to talk some sports with your cube mate. Unfortunately, you're going to be able to keep on working while it's doing those imports for you in the background. And real quick, another one I want to touch on, much like the filtering capabilities that were introduced we can now filter based on our selection toolbar for imported geometry if you have an assembly that has some imported stuff. And this isn't necessarily for imported geometry, but you can also filter based on feature, which is a new feature that you can filter. So that might come in handy. Instead of edges or points, you can select a feature and then select your bosses. You can select your fillets instead of getting the face. Moving one further into, I was talking about working with imported geometry a lot. A lot of times you will have a situation where you have a lot of parts that you don't need when you're opening up a lot of bodies that you don't need when you're working with imported geometry. Now we can just delete those or select them and do whatever you please with them based on their size or volume. And what it's showing right now is if you are looking for internal components, something inside an enclosure, and you don't want those bodies weighing down your model, selecting by volume gets those out of the way for you. Think like an electric motor has all those gears on the inside. You can just select by volume within that enclosure. It will select those internal bodies, and you can turn them off, delete them, whatever you feel like doing with them.
And that's I mean, if we start to pair some of these together, one, you don't have to wait an hour for that massive step file to import. Two, once that step file is imported, that you only care about the shell of it showing up in your assembly, you can select by volume and choose everything in one quick go rather than shift select, control unselect, find exactly which components are the outside shell, and then just delete in one go to really speed up that workflow. I think if you're dealing with imported geometry, the enhancements here that are speeding up your workflow are going to be tremendous to your productivity.
One more thing, if you have ever had a situation where you have dismissed a message and you need it to come back, and you have wondered how on earth do I get it to come back, I think especially the open referenced files. So if you have an assembly that has a part that has an in-context reference with another part, sometimes it'll open that for you and you wonder, what on earth is going on? Why did it open that? Do not show me this message again, and say, okay, now SOLIDWORKS 2026, you want to bring that message back. Right down here in the little corner, it displays your dismissed messages for you. And you can go in and just simply pick the ones you want to come back. You don't have to bring them all back or reset your settings. If you've ever had to restore copy settings wizard just because you did hit do not show again, we don't have to mess with that anymore. So that is all I had to show, and plus one little extra on working with some imported geometry. Matt, I hand it back over to you for some collaboration.
What year were multi-body parts first introduced to SOLIDWORKS? 1998, 2000, 2003, or 2007? 2003. Next up, what year was the first SOLIDWORKS certification made available? And before I answer this question, do we have any certified CSWA, CSWP, any certifications in the house? Awesome. Yeah. So SOLIDWORKS certifications allow you to take a test based on design questions that they'll give you, both theoretical and practical, jumping into the models. So if you're not aware, just before I dive into this question, if you have a license on active subscription, you do get certification credits that you can take these tests and get certified that come with your license. So it refreshes every 6 months. So be sure to look into that. If you have any questions over at the happy hour, happy to guide you on how to get access to those credits. All right, here we go. 1995, 1997, 1999, or 2000? It was in 1997. So the first CSWP was the first certification released in 1997. The actual certification program was officially, I guess, certified in 1998, 1 year after that first CSWP was launched, with additional certifications being made available. Now there are plenty of certifications for you to get into to show your niche knowledge. Certified SOLIDWORKS professional, when I'm saying CSWP, sheet metal, weldments, all the different kind of segments of SOLIDWORKS have their own specialty certification, and you can really rank up your reputation. Awesome. All right, like Tom mentioned, we're going to be diving into some collaboration. we're going to be diving a little bit into some of the 3D experience capabilities, the cloud capabilities, chatted a little bit about some of these sporadically throughout, but we're focusing more on what's been improving and being added with this to streamline your workflow and enhance it even further. Now, I got started with SOLIDWORKS with design, then I got tasked with setting up PDM standard and did a lot of self-learning with PDM, and I really fell in love with just data management. So maybe a little bit dry for some people, but I love getting into governance, and it gets me really excited. With that, when I got started with SWYFT, I was a lot of self-exploration into the platform and the 3D Experience platform that now comes with 3D Experience SolidWorks and new licenses of SolidWorks as well that you're purchasing with the standalone or network license. You have access to these capabilities today. If you're using PDM, some of them can work alongside PDM, and some of them are kind of in place of PDM. So it's whether you want to do the full revision management here, you can choose to do that. But there are capabilities that we'll be seeing here that even if you use PDM, you can take advantage of today. Now, there are a lot of enhancements here, so I'm going to do some rather quick hitters here and go through. I could spend all day diving into any one of these topics and showing the nitty-gritty, but I don't want to cut anyone here until, I don't know, 9 p.m., 10 p.m., so we'll get you all home. This first enhancement, we're going to be getting a guest speaker here in a moment, doing a little bit of a deeper dive, but Aura is a newly integrated AI chat, essentially, think of it, integrated into your SolidWorks experience. So what you're seeing here is the 3D Experience platform. This is in your web browser. You can set this up to choose which information it's pulling from. We'll get a highlight of how that actually works, but it's pulling from SolidWorks official documentation as well, ultimately. So you can ask it very niche questions about how to do something in SolidWorks and get that feedback, whether it's in your web browser or even right in the task pane inside of SolidWorks. So be diving further into that here in a moment. Now, this capability here, save configuration, sometimes you start a part off with a lot of different configurations, and then you realize you actually want one of these to be their own part file. So we now have the option to just right-click on one of those configurations and save as its own part, and it will automatically save it to the 3D Experience platform. You can choose if it's an assembly, if you want this part to be tied back to the original, or if you want a new copy of that iteration. And we see here that that has that underscore new because we chose to save that as a new part altogether. The SolidWorks user forum, user community, as some other people may be familiar with it. You can also, like you saw with Aura, just open this right up in your task pane inside of SolidWorks. So you can be really closely connected with that community of other passionate users and designers of SolidWorks. You can ask questions there, get feedback on how other people are doing things, if they have any other creative ways that maybe will take you to the next level of how you're using SolidWorks today, and keep all the notifications coming through right in your SolidWorks window as well, not having to jump back and forth between your web browser and SolidWorks. The share command. This one is super exciting. If you haven't heard anything about this, whether you have no PDM, whether you have PDM, whether you're using the platform to store data, wherever the files are, this capability can be utilized by you. You do have to have a 3D Experience account to kick it off. The person receiving it does not have to have a paid license. They have to make a free account, does not have to be a paid license to view. This is kind of like a more of a collaborative sharing, preview, markups, feedback, etc. I can choose to share, and whether that's a graphics only or whether that's a specific file type, step files, the actual solid file, a solid part file, solid assembly file, drawing. Then I can choose, I want to restrict it to this specific person, or I can just copy a link and anybody that has the link can see it. And then it will generate that link. Somebody else gets that link, they just log in right in their web browser, they get to view that model, just like, I don't know if anybody's familiar with eDrawings, but it's just like eDrawings basically in your web browser. They don't have to install anything. They could be on their phone, they could be on a tablet, anywhere where they have an internet connection, they can view that part assembly drawing. And then if you chose to use STEP or SLD, PRT, ASM, DRW, they can download that file too. So you can restrict it to a graphics only. You don't have to share the actual physical model IP if you don't want to. But you can share that along with the preview. They can mark it up and send it back, that feedback to you as well. So this functionality is available as long as you have 3D Experience access. The data, it doesn't matter where the data is saved. It could be on your local hard drive. It's creating copy of an export file or a graphics only file when you click that share command from wherever you have it saved. Drawing stamping. This one is actually if you're using the 3D Experience platform for PLM capabilities, release, etc. So here we have our approval table here where traditionally if I go ahead and sign this off, I want to make sure that it's stamped with who approved it and when they approved it as well. And here we have an approval route where something's going through the release process. As soon as that goes through, it pulls the names of those users and snaps them right into your drawing for you dynamically, so you don't have to go and manually type that in. It also pulls the date of when that approval was signed off. All of those comments are stored so that you have that complete traceability of what somebody's feedback was when they approved something. And then all of that is stored on a revision basis too. So as you revise the drawing, that will then apply to the next revision, et cetera, et cetera. The weldment cut list, I know we talked a little bit about structural members, still fits into this. When I say weldment, when you insert certain components into a SOLIDWORKS part file, it adds a weldment feature. When you add a weldment feature, you have that cut list added in to your part. So you can have a weldment with structural members, which are the traditional structural members that you would see in Tom's demonstration of the parts, but also you can add sheet metal parts to a weldment as well. You can add just regular solid model bodies to it as well. So those all count in this functionality. Traditionally, that's a single part file. You only have the visibility of that part file. On a drawing, you can add the cut list and have the visibility on the individual bodies of the weldment, but that's really the only place that you could see it. With this, if you click Publish Cut List Items, when you save it into the platform, it actually kind of explodes it out like an assembly would traditionally be viewed. So you can see the individual bodies, whether it's sheet metal, structural members, solid bodies of that weldment file in the platform. So as you're doing a bill of materials, you can choose to include all of those individual bodies and make sure that you have, and it does recognize if the structural member is exactly the same, it will just increase the quantity of that true bill of materials functionality there. And then you can synchronize the cut list properties to the platform like you would custom properties for a part file. So you can have full properties, dynamic filtering, searching, and everything based on individual bodies of a cut list, which is super exciting and super powerful. Just as a note on this, everything is tied back to the part file's revision in this. You're not revising individual bodies. If you revise the weldment, it's showing that revision for all of the individual bodies inside of that weldment. Design tables. Anybody use design tables? Okay, awesome. They're super powerful. You can put a lot of logic into an Excel file and drive a lot of different iterations of something that might be different length, a slightly different variation of that. With that, it can be tied to an external Excel file, but if I was to save that to the platform previously, it didn't tie that Excel file, so one person might be able to have it, but if another person opened that up, they didn't have that Excel file to reference back to for any changes. Now it actually pulls that Excel file in along with it as a reference, so that regardless of what computer you open that part on, regardless of what computer anybody opens that part on, it pulls that Excel file down for you as well, so that you have that full editability of that design, of that part. And you can see it referenced as well. So if you're exploring the references of a file, I want to see the relations and children and parents of this part, it shows up there so you can see, okay, this part has a design table associated with it. If I'm going to make changes, I'm going to want to make changes to this design table. Deformable components is a really interesting concept that I've always read interesting ways that people handle this, but this is taking it to, ultimately, if you want to truly handle something like this, you need a data management or a lifecycle management system. And in the case of how this is now built to handle deformable components, here we have a drawing of a seal. It's just the cross-sectional reference of that seal as it would be on your shelf. We can apply a specific part number to that seal, and we can set this seal is going to be a deformable component. This is the stock form of it. It's just on the shelf. It's flat, straight. But what if I want to use that in an assembly? Now we have this seal around this window here, but it's formed. But I don't want to save a duplicate into my system. It's the same part technically, it's just deformed. But what I can do is I can say this is the deform version, and I can tie it back to that original part number. So it actually is not creating a new part number in your system, it's creating a reference back to the deformable component. That's what's actually on your shelf, and this is kind of like what's actually used in manufacturing. You search that part number, everywhere that's used, it shows up, whether it's the deformable component that is as stock or the deformed component as it's used in an assembly. Bookmark update. In terms of how people have also creatively synchronized different template files and document templates and things between computers, seen a lot of different ways. But the platform, if you have them stored there, you can set it up in your file locations to pull them to your local machine. So let's say that you have a revision table template, you want everybody to use it. If you're on site, you've got a server, no problem, you just point back to that server location. But if you're distributed or if you're ever off site, you've now lost reference to that file. So with this, you can store it in the cloud, and then you choose that location, and it synchronizes a copy locally. When this capability was first released, you couldn't have it automatically update. If somebody else made a change to it, you'd have to know to go there and click check if there's been any updates or click to check to update. Now it will automatically synchronize those. So if there's changes, you don't even have to think about it. It will pull the latest one in for you. You can be working with a completely distributed team or even yourself jumping between different computers and just have that set up regardless of where you are, that you don't have to make sure is the same between the computers. In terms of 3D Swim, that is that community environment. So if you're collaborating with your team via 3D Swim, traditionally it was things like just posting things or asking questions. They've also added additional media types, one of which being projects. So if you're doing any project planning, that's a separate capability on the platform altogether, but you can set up full Gantt charts and risk assessment and everything with a project plan. You can now pull that into your community as an object type. So then rather than jumping between one area and another on your platform to find all these different communications, updates on your projects, you stick in one place and you get everything there, including the project timelines. Office document routing. Now, I've talked a lot about CAD, but the platform is not necessarily just for CAD. You can also store and manage your document control, PDFs, Excel docs, Word docs, specification documents, things like that. You can have those routed and controlled, engineering release and revision control all through the platform as well. With Office document routing, we have this one that's in a frozen state, so no changes. We want to go to release it for final release. With this, we'll go ahead and jump over to an approver because it kicked off an approval route automatically. Instead of having to create the approval route and attach it, which was historically the way, it kicked off the approval route automatically. So this is closer to what, if anybody's familiar with traditional PDM, you can set that functionality up where it's kicking off a certain route when you submit something for approval. That's more in line with this, to where it will kick that off automatically rather than you creating it and attaching it. As of today, that's the CAD document still has to be route created, then CAD, but there is change actions that carry out this for CAD documents in a very streamlined fashion as well. Bookmark navigation. Bookmarks, if anybody has gotten onto the platform, this is a bittersweet topic for people just getting started. It's super powerful, but if you're not quite sure what's going on, it can be confusing. It looks like folders. It's built to give you a more familiar folder file experience, but it's more like a tag. So you can actually have things in one thing in multiple folders because it's really stored somewhere else and tagged in these bookmarks. Now when you go to open it and you choose to open it from a bookmark, instead of just choosing the first one on a list that you don't even know there's multiple, it gives you the option, I want to open it and have it in the context of this project that I was working on. So just an example, like you've got a screw, you can have that in 5 different projects. Traditionally, you'd want to have one folder and everything pointing back to that one folder. With the bookmarks, you can just have that screw in every different folder. It's actually one part file. Conversation groups, it does have the capability to carry out chat through here as well. So some people may be using like Teams, Zoom, other communication methods, but if you're not using anything like that or want to be more closely integrated within SOLIDWORKS, you can chat with your team right inside of SOLIDWORKS. What they did do is add the ability to group these conversations. So if you have a certain team that you're more typically chatting with and you want to have their chat up at the top, you can group those and order those chats and keep those organized. This one is very exciting. For anybody that's familiar with PDM, there's revisions and there's versions. Traditionally, there was only revisions on the platform. You could do minor revisions, etc. But there are iterations and you can also add comments just like you can with revisions. So if I'm not ready to release a product and then increase the revision the next time I want to change, I can keep this previous iteration. And if I want to add a comment, I can. And what it's doing is, let's say I'm making a design change I'm not 100% confident is going to go through. I want to be able to go back in time if I need to and have that last design iteration backed up. I'll go ahead and save that with the iteration, and now I can go back if I ever need to. I have that history, but it's not actually modifying my revision. So it's bringing that more traditional kind of version functionality, allowing you to keep those incremental changes without increasing the actual revision property. Smart components. Anybody use smart components? It's a little bit more of a niche capability. Oh, we got one, nice. So smart components, if you're ever inserting, in this example, a bushing, you want to cut out the inset for the bushing to actually go into first, logically. But with smart components, you can create a feature, basically a cut feature, that adds the cut for you. Traditionally, you couldn't save this type of feature in the platform. It just wouldn't have that smart feature saved with it. Now, when you save parts with smart features integrated with them, it keeps that. So here we right-clicked, inserted the smart feature, and you can see that added the cut for it. So this means you don't have to remember the specifications of exactly what that hole size is each and every time you use it. You can just have that cut feature built into the actual model. You insert it, made it, insert the cut through the part. And that can be saved to the platform for everybody on your team to use. Awesome. So there's a lot there in terms of collaboration. We're going to have Brian Reel jump up and dive a little bit more into some of the AI capabilities around SOLIDWORKS and what's coming around the AI.
Excellent. Thank you. So I am Brian Reel. I've spent about 20-some years in the channel helping partners in Midwest here. And I've been with Dassault for about 1.5 years, working with partners like Matt and Tom. And I wanted to show kind of a deeper dive into some of the new AI functionality that is either current or getting ready to increase or grow from that. So there's really 3 areas that we focus on. We have the assistive side with AI. We have the predictive side, trying to speed things up, guessing where you're going to go next. And then we have the generative side, which is, doing things for us, right? We've seen some examples of that already. What we wanted to start with here is on the assist side, introducing Aura to the platform in July, I believe, allowed us to search for information based on the 3ds documentation, so like the help documents, any training or best practices that were published from the brand, as well as your swim community. And inside of that, I decided to try an example of, that's cool, but what would you really use that for, right? So the first thing I tried to do is I put in some misinformation into my private community that says, here's how you install SOLIDWORKS on a Mac. Can we install SOLIDWORKS on a Mac? Not natively, right? It takes some extra work. But in my post, I simply put, yes, here's how you do it. Okay? And to try to break Aura. So Aura, I go and I say, can I install SOLIDWORKS on a Mac? Absolutely. Here's how you do it. Because it's finding information I have put in my community. That's one of the places Aura will go look. I'm just simply saying don't trust everything AI gives you. I think everybody would agree with that, right? It's a great tool. It's going to be wonderful. Let's just not trust everything. It also shows me the sources, where it went to go find that information. Community post were the first 2 things listed there. The other are web documents that it has access to, okay? The important thing to note about that is this community that I've created is really a secret community. I have to be invited to it. Only myself and another coworker could see it, so we could test this. We had a third coworker who doesn't have access to this. He also doesn't have access to SOLIDWORKS. He's a CATIA guy. But he typed the same question, same result. CATIA cannot be natively installed on a Mac OS either. So since he's not connected to my private misinformation community, he gets the accurate answer that yes, it can, but you have to do this, this, and this, which is accurate, okay? So that's just kind of a precursor. Let's go a little deeper here. In SOLIDWORKS, as Matt pointed out, you can go right to your 3D Experience task pane. You can access the compass. You can find your 3D Swim app. And I'm, again, never leaving the software. I'm just doing everything inside the window. I wanted to test Aura not on things that are broken, but how could a customer, you guys, use Aura to help keep your design team on the same page, right? We don't want somebody pulling some exotic material. These are the 6-7 materials we typically use. Let's try to stay in that realm, right? So I go in, I launch Aura, I create a new conversation, and I just typed in a sample question of, how do I create a custom gauge table? Well, we're assuming we're going to talk about sheet metal here, but I have 3 choices of where Aura is currently looking to go find that information. My personal communities, right or wrong, things I've posted, the 3DS branded stuff, as well as the help documentation. So it's looking at all 3 of those, and it gives me an answer of pretty much straight from the help file. Here's how you would do that. But it also noticed that we had created an internal posted to our company web, our company community, that a user found a benefit of doing it this way, or an additional option, let's say. It added that to my answer as well. So I'm getting the help file answer plus my custom answer all in one place, right? Again, that's shown by looking at those 2 sources that pop up at the bottom. So that's useful, right? Being able to find information like that. What we also did to go a little deeper is we created these kind of like design specs. For example, what are our preferred vendors? Who we typically buy products from before we assemble or manufacture? What type of material specs do I have if I use a bushing or a bearing or something like that, right? So again, these are communities that are just inside my company's community here. Created another community that is focused on knowledge sharing, right? We all have tribal knowledge. If we create a post of, this is how I found my extrude feature number 12 to work better, create a post about it. Or it can look into that for information as well. And the final answer was, again, you could type multiple questions, but again, I'm only looking or focusing on my communities. I'm not worried about what the web says or what SOLIDWORKS is saying about something specifically. Again, what materials can I use? Those are some examples. The one I settled on was, what weldment profiles can I use for a brand new design? That's a legitimate question that I think a new designer, a new engineer might be struck with. This is a simple example. I only put 2 profiles in my list. There's obviously a lot more we could pick from. But Aura was really quick to come back and say, these are the 2 you have available. There you go, off to the races, right? I know what I can use. I'm off to make my design. So that's how I think Aura could help right now, as of today, in your own communities that you have access to. Not replacing your entire design spec catalog, but at least putting in some key information there. So on the predictive side, this actually came out earlier in the year in 2025, but it's the predictive, we call it the command predictor. Anybody still have like 37 toolbars turned on or on your SOLIDWORKS window with space to scale? Oh yeah, smaller. Hopefully not. Hopefully you use a command manager and you're storing the ones that you typically use, but command predictor took that a step further and said, you know what, when you do this, we're betting you're going to pick one of these next 7 commands next. Or when you do that sketch, you're going to probably use these 5 or 6 features next. It's not like super inclusive yet. It doesn't learn from you, but these are pre-programmed responses that SOLIDWORKS, through years of education, have decided would be the next logical step or feature to go through. So try that out if you haven't had a chance to go. And then on the generative side, we've already shown some nice examples of the auto-generate drawing. That is just, again, came out earlier in this year, but is going to be enhanced even further with 2026. So didn't want to steal too much thunder there, but it's a good idea, right? And like I said, I think Tom pointed this out. Even if this gets you 70 or 80% of the way, that's free. Just let it do it, right? You do the rest to clean it up. Future. We don't like to talk features because we don't know when exactly they're going to come about, but this is kind of what Diaz is working on behind the scenes. You have access to, your community, the help file, things like that. What if we had other sources, like academic knowledge, things that are not IP, it's just standard generic, knowledge. What if Aura could get access to that? What if Aura could also get access to patent and applications or other publications, things that you're probably going to do a Google search, but let's let the AI tool help you do that. So those are some directions of where we're trying to head in the future. And I believe that's it. So this is the DS portfolio, the multiple brands that we have available. SOLIDWORKS is the red one. I'm wearing the red shirt. I work for SOLIDWORKS, but I wanted to thank you for your time.
Yeah, so we're going to keep the good times rolling with data management, and we're going to jump into legacy PDM and what's new with PDM for anybody out there that's using PDM. So with PDM, traditionally, the search button in the top right would just be one button there, but it is now split on the left side. If you click that, it will load your last used search, and the right side will be a drop down where you can see your favorites, your search cards, etc. In that drop down. Search favorites, now you can have in that drop down that we just covered, we have this option, run search favorite on load. So rather than clicking on a favorite and it loading immediately, you can uncheck that, click your favorite, it pulls up everything pre-filled, but it allows you to tweak it, edit it before you actually click run. So if you want to use a favorite as a starting point rather than clicking run, waiting for it to load all the results, then changing it and rerunning the search, you can uncheck that, click the search, it'll pull up everything pre-filled for you, then you can go and modify it, then hit run, making that a little bit more streamlined for you. In terms of search cards, you now have the option to choose between exact match or a wildcard in terms of specific properties. So you're choosing this in your card editor. You're choosing for this property, I want it to be an exact match or I want it to be an implicit wildcard. So in this example, we have gear ASSY searched, but if we go ahead and look at the properties of the result, ASSY-rotation gearbox. So since we chose that wildcard, it's not looking for an exact match. It's looking for some combination of those words somewhere in the properties that it's searching within. So it found ASSY and gear in that search, so it was still pulled into. Whereas if it was set to exact match, it would have to be that exact string, or else it would not pull that result. This one is really cool. In terms of transfer ownership, in terms of PDM, you're running the caching the data locally. So you check it out, it's on your local hard drive, and then you have to check that back in to push it to the server, and then somebody else can then check that out on a different computer and edit it. There's a couple scenarios where you're kind of stuck if somebody leaves the company and they didn't check in their changes and they're wiped their machine, or if somebody's out of the office for 3 weeks and you can't get into their machine to check in their changes. The changes are there, but you can't get to them, you can't check them in, therefore nobody else can access them. So with transfer ownership, we have user number 1 here jumping in and modifying an assembly. It's already checked out. So in this case, we just want to suppress this top component. It's going to be mounted in a different location. So we'll go ahead and save that, but that's only saving it to your local cache. That didn't automatically check it in. Now I'm going to pause here and just explain what switched. I switched to a different user that logged in. That user is no longer with the organization, but never checked in those changes. So with this, user number 2 is now logged in with the right permissions, of course, can go in and click on this transfer ownership. And what this is doing is it's backing up that cache to the archive server on a recurring basis, so that even if somebody's not available, somebody transfers that ownership, it pulls a copy of that to your cache, and then registers it as locally modified, that you can then check in on your computer, even if you weren't the one that made the changes originally. So it helps increase that insurance that you're not going to have somebody make a bunch of changes locally and then just bounce and delete everything. They might think they're slick and clear out their local cache, but it's protected. In terms of revision information, we can now, in the contains area where you're seeing those references, see that revision information right there. So I'm seeing not just that I'm referencing in containing this part, I'm referencing revision A of this part and see that column right there in that contains area as well. Embedded preview, so that eDrawings, built-in integration of eDrawings inside of your PDM has updated functionality for step and parasolid files to where it can preview those right inside of the File Explorer without you having to open them in SOLIDWORKS, just like SOLIDWORKS files have traditionally been available with. Folder access rights. Now, in terms of folder access rights, you've had the capability of taking a specific user and saying, this folder nested with these release drawings, I want them to have access to this, but I don't want them to have any access to anything that's currently in design. So you had the options of setting it in a different folder somewhere, or you could give them access to that location, but they couldn't, if it was nested down in any other folders they didn't have access to, they wouldn't be able to see the folders to click on to navigate to that folder. So ultimately they could get there if they knew the exact path and typed it in to the file explorer, hit enter, it would load for them, but they couldn't see anything because the parent, the folder above it, they didn't have access to. So in terms of 2026, there's been a new option added by admin where you can go in for a specific user, folder permissions of a specific user, and select the folder that you want them to have access to. So we'll go down here in this P001, go into the release drawings folder for manufacturing specifically. I want them to have access. So I can turn on this may see folders to navigate to this subfolder with read file contents. And now they can see P001, they can see design, they can navigate to that, but it won't show any of the other data that's in the folders. It allows them to see the actual folders themselves so that they can just naturally navigate to the folder they have access to, but it's not going to give them inherent access to anything that they shouldn't have access to otherwise. For Web 2, if you're doing any kind of Web 2 use where you're jumping into a web browser to view some of this information collaboratively, logging into this, there's a couple of things. You now have updated login loading. You saw that there. That's just not the main highlight, but it is updated. Also, when you load a preview, it's not going to open the information pane automatically, so you have a little bit more real estate in terms of the actual preview. You can open up that information pane if you want. And then for the bill of materials, you can get into named bill of materials here in a collapsible view in the Web 2 interface for PDM as well. So increasing where you can view that data rather than having to go into File Explorer locally to view that interface, now available right in the web browser if you have Web 2 set up. There's been some updates with the task the convert task. So with that, the couple of different things. The ACIS file type can now go up to version 33 for exporting, and then for parasolids, it can now go up to version 35.1. And then for STL files, we now have the ability to configure just like you would traditionally in SOLIDWORKS if you're doing file save as STL and how you customize the granularity and tessellation. You can customize that via that task as well. Now for draft site to PDF, you can now get into advanced scripting if you want to script the path and the file name of that, as well as Office to PDF. You now have those advanced scripting options for draft site to PDF and Office documents to PDF as well. Now archive workflows, if you want to go through, you're not using this workflow anymore, but you might revisit it in the future, you might not want to just delete it out rather than having to go through and rebuilding it or keeping your workspace cluttered up with workflows you're not using anymore. You can archive, and then if you ever need them again, you can just right-click on archive, and it will bring it back to your available workflows that you can utilize. Awesome. So that was just a highlight of what's new with PDM. Now there is actually even more, but where I know we've got about 25 minutes before we are heading over for happy hour. So we're going to move right along here. I'm going to hand things off to Tom. When we come back, we're going to be wrapping up with our last questions of the quiz as well.
All right, thanks, Matt. I know PDM or PLM on the cloud, both super powerful things. Glad to have a little bit of insight into some of the portions that they're improving for 2026. Now, I'm going to ask a real quick question from the room. Anybody use SOLIDWORKS Electrical? 1, 2. All right, let's get into this. As Matt mentioned, we do have a lot to cover today, so I'm not going to do a super deep dive on SOLIDWORKS Electrical, but I don't want you to think that means that SOLIDWORKS is at all glossing over electrical. They see that there's an increase of use out in the field, and people are designing connectors. People are looking for the most efficient routing of their wiring, going back to what Matt had pointed out before. A lot of that is included in SOLIDWORKS Electrical as well. They have, now let me share my, there we go. Now part reference import, in the past this has been somewhat limited, and now pulling in from manufacturers' libraries in 2026 gives you a lot more options. It might not make a whole lot of, I guess it might not be super relevant if you don't ever use SOLIDWORKS Electrical, but just note that if you do need to use an electrical library, a lot of it is driven by an Excel sheet still. Not everybody has 3D data for all of their little electrical connectors and everything. And SOLIDWORKS Electrical is making it easier to import all of that data. Dynamic connectors. So in terms of drawing SOLIDWORKS, of course, a lot of electrical is going to be done on 2D schematics as well. So this is included in the SOLIDWORKS Electrical and the improvements made with it. Now, assigning parts as accessories in 2026, you can, right in the title, you can assign parts as accessories. This is specifically for like terminals and circuits. Let's say you get outside of that, but you still want to use electrical to define your clamps, your boots, anything for strain relief. This is going to improve your downstream documentation, help manufacturing consistency. If you know if it's an electrical component versus an accessory component, it can even help impact your work stream flow. Okay, we have more PDF export options. So there's more flexibility now. You can choose to organize by project or your book or your page. Previously, it was more of just a blank export without any of that data embedded. Yeah, so again, I hear some mutterings on that, and that's very indicative of why SOLIDWORKS is throwing a lot of their energy. Maybe we aren't covering a whole lot today in today's presentation, but SOLIDWORKS is absolutely paying a lot of attention to SOLIDWORKS Electrical and trying to make it better for everybody. And cable management, we're getting real deep in the weeds here today. Just know that SOLIDWORKS Electrical, it has a lot more capabilities in terms of, let me get back to this one, there we go. Finding the data that you need to go along with your wires, whether that's the casings or, as Matt showed, insulation, and you can add that right to the electrical route, very similar to Matt's demonstration there on the routing capability side of things as well. All right, Matt, sorry, I hope you had enough of a break. I'm going to go ahead and hand it back to you a little bit early. This is certainly, I think, maybe going to be a little bit more applicable, and it's a little bit easier on the eyes too than looking at schematics and trying to figure out what those electrical symbols mean if you're not already enveloped in the electrical world.
Phone time. Let's finish out this quiz and see who our winner is. And then I'll wrap up with simulation, and then we may cut draft site and composer depending on our time. And then always available to talk over draft site and composer. Right over on at the happy hour, we'll have our computers. So if you have questions on anything that you saw today, or a couple of the smaller topics that we didn't have a chance to get to, we can walk through those right on over there. So with the quiz, looks like everybody that's joining looks good to go. So I'll go ahead and select next here. What year were configurations first made available in SOLIDWORKS? 1996, 1998, 1999, or 2002? 1996. So very early in the SOLIDWORKS development, configurations were added for parts. In terms of the timeline, for anyone unaware, the company itself, founded in 93, then releases started coming in 95, and then acquired by Dassault Systems in 97. So this is very, very early on. Even before Dassault Systems had acquired SOLIDWORKS, we had configurations for parts. And last question, everybody ready? When was the SOLIDWORKS user group network founded? And before I kick off this question, who's been to a user group meeting here in West Michigan? Awesome. I see some hands not up. Missed opportunity, and there's opportunities coming. So we've got really big, strong community here in West Michigan. One of the best meetings in the world, actually. And in December, we have a summit in terms of technical content, all-day sessions, where it's almost like a mini 3D experience world, SOLIDWORKS world, where you can go and learn about all different types of content. If you have not been to one, certainly come and ask us about it. We have Jesse over here as well to head that program, and Andrew as well to head that program. So super excited to have them here today. They will be able to answer any questions about that user group to get involved as well. 1999, 2002, 2005, or 2009? $1999. Very early, SOLIDWORKS saw the value in building a strong community of people that were passionate about their product, that could not only help each other with individual problems and just teach and spread that love of the product and help each other learn. So I'm going to save the announcement. I'm going to jump to my topic, or else you all might leave. So I'm going to hold you here and make sure that you ride along with the simulation here. So quick highlight of some of the simulation. In terms of shell edges, anybody doing simulations on anything that's going to be thin material, sheet metal is the main one that would come to mind. In terms of distributed loads, you previously couldn't apply that to the edges of a shell model. A shell model is taking a thin body and just putting it as a 2D plane rather than 3D geometry to simplify the actual model for the simulation and reduce the solve time itself. Now we can take a distributed load and apply it to a shell edge. And a distributed load means that you don't have to model like something that's pushing from a distance in any way. You don't actually have to model that in. You just have where that force is coming from and the direction it's pushing. And you have that theoretical load from a different point applied to these edges. In terms of, oops, I didn't hit go. So in remote load mass, you can go ahead and select the location. So you can define that by a coordinate system, and that can be divided by XYZ angle as well. And then you choose those edges. And so now we can choose the shell edges that would traditionally be needing to be a solid model. In terms of simulation setup, this is a big thing just with SOLIDWORKS that I've heard people look for, is just increased context if something goes wrong. So here we have this material is not applied to this body. Not only does it tell me that, it tells me what body it is. So if I want to go and filter for that body, it snaps down to just that body that doesn't have that material. So it's helping you get to why something's not working faster by providing you more context of what body did not have that material. In terms of angular displacement, traditionally displacement plots you can only do in a linear direction, XYZ resultant, but now we can do angular displacement plot as well, to where we can choose the rotation in a certain direction and then choose whether we want degrees or radians to be the unit of measure of that angular displacement. And then we can take that in a very similar way that we would traditionally would have done with linear. We can see how much something is going to rotate. In terms of shell definitions, if you're into any simulations defining a lot of sheet metal components, you will want to choose whether something is recognized as a thin or thick shell. It has to do with a certain ratio. I don't need to get into the nitty-gritty of what a thin and thick shell is. Basically, if you want shear to be considered, you want to make sure to have a thick shell, is the simple way of putting it. If you're doing a lot where shear needs to be considered, you can now set thick as a default so that you don't have to go and toggle it down to thick every time, where previously it just defaulted to thin every time, saving you a click. Some of those things seem small, but if you're doing a sheet metal component as 500 components and going in and defining that, that can save a lot of time. Pin connector forces. In terms of pin connector, you can put a theoretical pin in your model to simulate that being connected without having the actual physical geometry. But with these results, we can now go into connector forces. And then we can go not only by a certain type of connector, we can even narrow it down to a specific pin in that model that we want to take a look at the resultant forces of, and choose that specific connector. And then we can see the force, the bending moment, the torque of that theoretical pin to make sure that you're getting all of that data. Make sure that as this Vermeer machine is putting on a tremendous load, I mean 28,000 pounds of thrust force, and it's vibrating. There's a lot of random forces and everything on these pins and connectors. You want to make sure that that's not going to shear. In terms of simulations on weldment and structural members, you can define the loads on a per unit basis, a per unit length basis for beams. So we can select the overall beams, and then we'll go ahead and select the direction or reference plane of the direction. So we'll use a top plane, and then we'll do normal to the top plane. We'll select 40,000 newtons and reverse the direction to be a downward force. Now we can say per item, that's 40,000 newtons, or total, and we can say per unit length. So traditionally, you would have had to do the math. You would have had to find the length, understand the total force, do the calculation of what that per unit length would be, and then apply that math. This allows it to, regardless of which beams you've selected, it's just on that per unit length, per inch, per foot, per centimeter, etc. In terms of seismic response studies, the ability to load up a remote mass is now available for these beams. You can go through, similarly to how we had the coordinate system, I can select the individual beams that the force will be applied to. Then we can go through and select either global coordinate system or user defined, or even just type in the location from based off of the origin, apply the force, and it will apply that remote load onto the beam members. In terms of buckling modes, if anybody's doing any kind of simulations where they want to understand, you're looking at eigenvalues. So we jump in, run the vibration study. You can see the buckling factor of safety. Sometimes there's negative values that come in that aren't going to be relevant to what you're actually looking for in terms of you're looking for those positive values. You can filter out the negative values and still look for the first 5 positive values so that you don't have to start guessing. I need to go 8, 9 to make sure that I get 5 positive values. Now there have been improvements just overall with connectors, bolts, rods, and bearing connectors. If you're using these in a simulation, there's been up to 28% reduction in solve times with these connectors, making sure that the simulations you're getting your answers, iterating your product development faster. And there was also an issue in 2025 where if you had a specific combination of this bolt with this mesh type and this solver, it would error out. That has been repaired now. So I don't know if anybody, power users of simulation, but if you've received this error in the past, which I don't know if anybody here has, it is now resolved. And then, let's see here. I think we might be going ahead and taking a look at the winner. And then if anybody wants to learn about plastics, flow, draft site, or composer, we'll be over at the happy hour and we can answer or walk through those capabilities there. Without further ado, let's go ahead and take a look. Nope, didn't show me the animation. Third place, we've got Nick. Congratulations. Be Real, for number 2. Oh, Andrew, look at that. Awesome. So I'm going to have Stephen jump back up here to say a couple of closing words, make sure everybody knows where we're heading next. If you would be so gracious to join us, we'd love to have you there. And
Yeah, I think we got a... Andrew, do you play pickleball? Well, you do now, so... So we got a Dassault System pickleball paddle set there for you, as well as hook you up with a Kuti or something later too, Andrew. Thanks so much for participating and engaging today. And one more, if you guys still have your phones out, I'd highly recommend you take a picture of this screen right here because it's never going to be shown again and it's only going to be up for a short period of time. But also on there, you get the chance to collaborate with Tom and Matt every single week. We have a coaching call on Wednesdays. Wednesdays at 3:30, you get the chance to hang out with these guys live on a call. So take a picture of that and join that call. Again, at every single week on Wednesdays at 3:30. Also, over here at Live Event Only Sellers Promotion, that you're going to want to know what's going on there. So you can book a call with Brayman. We had to step out. But if you're interested in getting into SOLIDWORKS 2026, you're not quite up there yet, click on that. We'll hook you up. Also, there's some other things we want to show you there. So look at Media and Brandon. It'll tell you what that's all about. If you're looking at expanding the SOLIDWORKS that you have today or getting into some of the capabilities of electrical with plastics or some of the cool simulation stuff that we talked about today as well. Next, I did just get a text as I was walking up here that the bar is open. So it is down the street, the brewery right here. We're going upstairs into the mezzanine. Like Matt mentioned, he's grabbing his laptop. Tom will grab his laptop. They're going to set up over there and hang out with you guys, answer one-on-one questions. Also, we'll be there till 6, so feel free to hang out, get to know each other, grab some other industry connections while you guys are out there. Just want to really thank you guys for coming out to the first SWYFT What's New 2026. So we'll be doing these again. So we'll make sure to let you guys know our next events. But thank you so much for coming out. We'll see you across the street.